Welcome everyone to Dr. John Bedker's Leadership Podcast, the podcast focused on leadership. The episode will begin shortly. Thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy the podcast.
Welcome everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in to the Dr. John Bedker Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, John Bedker. Well, we're starting 2025. It's going to be quite an interesting year. Today we're going to talk about a call to action, which is a key tool in dealing with change. And certainly as we enter into 2025, we are going to be dealing with significant change. Not necessarily good change, but significant change. And therefore, each and every one of us as leaders must be mindful of that call to action. We're going to be talking about that today in this podcast because of the change that we are going to be experiencing. Certainly now, just a few days in to the Donald Trump presidency, we're seeing significant change already. A flurry of executive orders, interviews, comments, statements. Let me just sum it all up by saying, holy cow. It is a time of huge, huge change, potentially. Well, I'm going to talk about all of that, and I'm going to do it the best that I can. Certainly need to be guided by three particular components of a call to action. To be succinct, I'll certainly try to do that. To be clear, absolutely to the best of my ability. And thirdly, to be compelling. Why is it so important? Let's start right there. My wife and I just returned from a trip to London. We chose to get out of town during the time of the inauguration. We did not feel, from a leadership point of view, that there was much to celebrate. Rather, quite the contrary. So we thought that we would get out of town. Well, in doing that, we had the opportunity to talk to people. Lots of people, different kinds of people. People from the United States that we ran into. People from other countries, several other countries. We spoke to cab drivers, restaurant servers, museum docents, a broad and diverse range of people who were keenly aware of the change going on now with Donald Trump, President of the United States. Not politically, let's emphasize that right from the get-go, but from a leadership point of view. What is that values proposition that now President Trump has already begun to bring? So, we're going to talk about that. Already in the United States, I've heard from several groups of people and read several articles about groups that are already organizing so that they can collectively and collaboratively begin to coordinate their calls to action. Well, there's an article I'm going to take a few snippets from. I want to make sure I give attribution. It's from Leading Maryland. The article is by Michael Rooney, and he talks about a call to action. So I'll quote that article from time to time. Again, just make sure I give attribution there. He begins his article just as I did, that the call to action is a key tool in dealing with change. All right, so why is it so important? Because we're in an age that is so different. We're in an age as leaders, not Democrat, not Republican, not independent, not whoever you are politically, but as a leadership matter, where misinformation, disinformation, and yes, sadly, tragically, lying are the orders of the day. It's common. It's customary. It's usual. And what happens when these type of things occur regularly over and over again is that perception becomes reality. If you listen to Fox News enough and you hear that story dozens and dozens of times, you say it must be true. Now, of course, this is I'll say loosely, a news outlet that has agreed to pay a fine of nearly $750 million for not telling the truth. Okay. So, one of the things we need to do in a successful call to action is to articulate why those actions are critical. They're critical, folks, because the very basis of leadership, do the right thing. Easy to say, sometimes really hard to do. It gets in this political world, and we don't want to do that. We want to stay in that leadership world, which frankly is quite different. So the criticality is because, as I've stated, that misinformation that's out there, that disinformation, and unfortunately the lying. Not by everyone, not by everywhere, but often, far too often, social media outlets, cable news outlets, put out this false narrative with such regularity that the perception is it's the truth, and it is not. And so that is really the reason why this call to action is so critical. All right, so when we're going to do something like this important leadership quality, how do we define it? What are the steps to defining this call to action? Well, for Michael Roney's piece, we need to identify the issue. I think we've done that a few times already. Misinformation, disinformation, and lying. Intolerable for a leader and for leadership. We need to evaluate the situation. This person, the President of the United States, one of the key global leaders in our world today, is a regular purveyor of this misinformation, disinformation, and yes, lying. We need to look at that root cause. Why does he do that? Why does he demand fealty from others to buy in to this? And perhaps most importantly, what are those potential consequences? Well, I've mentioned there are groups already forming to respond. Nurses, as an example. Several articles of how they are saying healthcare is important. The efficacy of vaccinations is not a question. There is efficacy to vaccinations. Is there perfection? No. But is there efficacy? Absolutely. Women's health care, reproductive health care. There is absolutely clear and sound science. Donald Trump got many votes from religious people running on a platform of anti-abortion. Now, they have this clever phrase, pro-life. It is absolutely not. We have already established stories of women tragically, horrifically bleeding out in a hospital parking lot because they cannot get the reproductive care that is absolutely needed at that time. Now, these people would call themselves pro-life, and literally women are dying. So this idea that they are pro-death is quite real. That they are pro-life is absolutely not truthful. And so that's a potential consequence. That's why call to action is so important, because the consequences literally can be fatal, literally can be lethal. Another quick example, certainly the January 6th pardons, which President Trump did en masse. People that wreaked havoc, violence, injury to people protecting literally the people's house, the U.S. Congress. And he has pardoned these people en masse. So now we have people who were the basis of an insurrection in the U.S. Capitol, who now are found to be pardoned for doing that. So the consequences here are quite huge. Okay, let's go on. Why is this important now to have a call to action? Let's talk about that quickly. Well, on so many levels. But as a leadership matter, we all know. But it's important to emphasize here that leaders need to be proactive, not reactive, and particularly to a crisis, right? The death of a woman in a hospital parking lot because she can't get care. The passing of Capitol policemen, and then having those people that brought that violence to them pardoned. Okay? We should never allow such things. And unfortunately, the course that we're headed down in 2025 may bring about any number of many and varied crises brought about by the actions of the person who holds this position of president. Not a leader, but a person of position, power, and authority. And unfortunately, that's a very bad recipe for someone and then for our citizens. So we have to think about that. Okay, let's move along. Next, I want to talk about what we can do. And we already know why we need to do things, but what can we do? So let's look at that. So leaders stand in front. They lead. They communicate. Hopefully, you have been a good servant of those you lead. Because when you do, you should have that capacity for those you serve to hear you, to listen, to process, to evaluate, to understand why it's so important, literally so critical, to collectively ensure that the decisions you're making, the courses of action you're taking, are based upon doing the right thing. That they're based upon facts, data, science, history. We have to believe in truth. We have to follow the truth. That is what leaders do. Sometimes that truth isn't always wonderful, right? Could be bad. A downturn in the company, in the economy. Whatever it may be. But to be honest about it and to talk about it honestly. This is hugely important. Because then that leader does feel appreciated. He does have that capacity to win engagement with those that they serve. And they have an opportunity then to have a dialogue. Because you want to make sure that there is that Q&A, that question and answer, for people to say, help me understand. Are you saying this? Let me make sure I understand what it is you're asking and why. There could be a whole discussion about this is different. This isn't what I heard in my social media feed. I want to make sure I get this right. And that discussion, that dialogue with those you serve will be hugely important. And we can't wait around, right? When we're delivering that message, it must be timely. As I've said over and over, it must be truthful, honest. It also needs to be upbeat, optimistic to the best that it can be. And again, sometimes news is not good news. You have to be confident and, again, to the best of your ability, inspiring. Because even if the news is bad, they need to know that you care about them, that you are telling them the truth. All right. Mentioned a few of these things. I'm going to go back to the Michael Rooney article here for a few quotes because it's important to re-emphasize some of the things that I've been saying. The delivery. The delivery of a call to action. Clear, concise, to the point. Now, I've only mentioned just a couple of examples. Each and every one of us may have our own that we feel absolutely just strongly about. And they're real. So please don't take that couple of examples as in toto. It is not. The issue that is to the point for you may be the most critical issue that there is for you. So, be clear, concise, to the point. We have to do it with a sense of urgency. Hopefully you're getting that in my voice today. This is not the kind of thing to put off. It's not the kind of thing to shrug your shoulders about and wonder, I don't know, that involves some effort. Yeah, it will. But there needs to be that sense of urgency. I have to give some detail, and hopefully I've done that. I mean, literally women dying in a hospital parking lot. Wow. Absolutely true. Yeah. The Q&A part, that back and forth, hugely important to have a dialogue. Leaders need dialogues. Employees, those you serve, they need to have that voice. They not only need to have voice, but they need to have access. You need to be available, and you need to hear what they are saying. So those are the things to do. Always important to flip that coin. Let's talk about things not to do. What not to do? Well, put spin on the truth. And again, we hear this in our social media all the time. Spin. A person goes up and says, politicians here, says, well, all these things Trump are doing are no different than what Biden did. And you go, there is no one without fault. But political fault and the core values fault can be very different. So, Biden giving pardons en masse to his family after saying he wouldn't. That's wrong. From a leadership point of view, crystal clear, that's wrong. But over 1,000 people who raided the Congress of the United States en masse, without individual review, violent acts, criminal acts, people that are convicted by a jury of their peers for sedition. These are not equivalents, folks. Everybody makes mistakes, sometimes egregious. But there is no equivalency here. Let's be clear from a leadership point of view. We're all going to make mistakes. But are we going to make them regularly and repeatedly and over? And when someone says, no, that fact isn't a fact, it's wrong, it's misinformation, are you going to say, oh, I get it, I'm sorry, I'm wrong? Or, in the case of President Trump, double down. Oh, you're challenging me? I'm going to not only say no, but I'm going to double my no. Put spin on the truth. Don't do that, folks. As leaders, please don't do that. Don't manipulate the data to fit the narrative. Again, routinely now we see that. Routinely we see that. The example I just gave. If you give some pardons, a presidential power, but someone else gives thousands, those are not the same. Okay? Not the same. Okay, so as a leader, when significant changes occur, and folks, that's where we are as we begin 2025, you must respond with decisiveness, effectiveness, and be all about the truth. That's what leaders do. That's what we're called to do. And as we begin 2025, we are all, as leaders, not political people, as leaders, called to act, to advance the truth, to be honest with those that we serve, to not be manipulated by others, not to give fealty to a person whose core values are about misinformation, disinformation, and yes, lying. So, call to action. Topic today, hugely important as we begin the year. We begin this new presidency. We absolutely wish him the best because our people, our country, and our world absolutely need honest, truthful, core valued leadership. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Great to be back from London. Great to be back with each and every one of you. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Dr. John Bedker's Leadership Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please tell your friends, and, of course, please follow our podcast and subscribe. Thank you again for tuning in.